We are live. I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, the March 2nd, 2022 edition. I'm Joe Terosian, and I'm here to talk Rams football with you. Had an interesting thing come up yesterday. Someone was asking me, Joe, you never introduce yourself. You're always selling your books at the end of the broadcast. And so, yeah, here's my book. Okay, I got a bunch of books. They're on Amazon. But my background is that I spent the previous, I spent about 21 years as a sports writer, covering local sports, local football. And we established with my friends Mid-Valley Sports. We created that around my kitchen table. And that was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And the whole goal of that was to be ready for when the Rams came back to Los Angeles. And we didn't know the Chargers were coming. And so we just ground all those years. We grounded and we grounded and grounded and grinded and grinded and grinded and covered everything that came down the pike. Covered XFL, covered Arena League, covered college football from Division III, Division II to college bowl games, and the whole goal was to be ready when the NFL came back. And I'm also a pastor. I pastor a church in Burbank, and so I have a family, and I just felt myself going in a different direction. And so I left Mid-Valley Sports at the end of 2017. And then in 2018, they started covering the San Diego Chargers, who came to Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Chargers. Sorry. And so I've been a part of that, covering sports and writing column FanView for over 20 years. And that's my background as a sports writer. I got paid. I was very fortunate enough to get paid. Did I get paid top dollar? No, but it paid for a lot of vacations. It paid off a lot of bills. But I grew up a Rams fan. And again, the whole goal was when I first got back into this was, hey, I want to be around when the Rams come back. And sure enough, they came back. And so that's my background. Okay. And that's about that. Today, we're going to talk about the Rams. We're going to talk about Rams drafts after their Super Bowl seasons. I broke that down a little bit yesterday, talking about how the Rams performed after their Super Bowl seasons. That after their first two Super Bowls, they made wild cards and they lost. After their next two Super Bowls, they didn't even qualify for the playoffs. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens coming up this year. Also, we're going to talk about quarterbacks. We're going to talk about drafts and everything. Drafts, I said that. But we're going to talk about where the stats go. And that's where I kind of wanted to start today was, the two most overrated stats you'll ever hear when evaluating a quarterback are completion percentage and interceptions. And this doesn't mean those things don't matter, but people get so caught up in, oh my gosh, Matthew Stafford threw 17 interceptions. He threw more interceptions than anybody on the planet. Folks, he won the Super Bowl. He won the Super Bowl. Do you know how many interceptions Matthew Stafford threw in the fourth quarter this year? None. Do you know how many interceptions he threw in the second half? He threw 4 interceptions in the second half of games. He had the one in the overtime loss to Frisco in Week 18, but he threw 22 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions in the second half this season. His completion percentage in the fourth quarter was 71%. That's what matters. What's the completion percentage in the fourth quarter? What's the completion percentage on third down? He was the top-rated completion percentage quarterback converting third downs this year as well. But when you look at the Pro Football Focus rankings, right, and Pro Football Focus is kind of the Bible. When you look at that, Joe Burrow, Tom Brady, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, they're the top 5 quarterbacks listed. Who's 6th? 6th is Kirk Cousins, and Stafford is ranked 7th. But who won the Super Bowl? Okay? Who won the Super Bowl? You want your quarterback being aggressive. You want him going downfield with the ball. And we get way too caught up with all these interceptions. Folks, it's all about possessions and about when those interceptions happen, right? If they're arm punts, if they're tipped. See Ben Skoranek in the Super Bowl. If they're tipped, if they happen in a moment where it doesn't matter. If they're not converted into points. Or do they cost you a drive? If you're throwing picks in the red zone, yeah, that's going to cost you something. But if you're throwing arm punts from midfield on 3rd and 15, folks, wake up and smell the pizza. How people evaluate quarterbacks, they're way too caught up in this. Do you know who had the same completion percentage as Matthew Stafford this year? Now, remember, Matthew Stafford won a Super Bowl. He completed 67% of his passes. That must mean he's a winner, right? Well, I guess Jared Goff's a winner too. Jared Goff completed 67% of his passes. I think Dak Prescott completed 68% of his passes. Do you understand what I'm saying here? These things are so overblown. I think actually if Stafford had thrown a few balls away when he should have, things would have his percentage would have been even lower. But he suffers from what I call post-traumatic Detroit syndrome, PTDS, and he was kept on trying to make plays, and sometimes he doesn't let a play die when it should die. But let's be real here, folks. Interceptions and completion percentage are overrated. There's value in them, but you got to read between the lines here and see what you got. Rodgers and Prescott had better, and Dak Prescott had better completion percentages than Stafford, but who won the Super Bowl? All right. And then what did he do in the fourth quarter? 0 interceptions. What was his completion percentage in the fourth quarter? 71%. So you need to look at this and don't let anyone derail you. Don't worry about his interceptions. Heck, if he throws 20 interceptions next year, maybe it's not the best look, but you know what? It's not something that's the end of the world when you think about where they happen, when they take place. All right? That's something you got to be thinking about. And I'm really tired. It's low-hanging fruit. A lot of sports talk people, it's just low-hanging fruit when they start going for, oh, look at his interceptions. Look at his completion percentage. It's not about your completion percentage. I think when KC won the Super Bowl back in 19, I think Mahomes' completion percentage was 64 or 65. And he's the greatest quarterback ever, right? and stuff. And that wasn't a sarcastic cough. That was a legitimate cough. But the completion percentage stuff is so overrated. It's in the moment. It's the situation and when and where the completions or the interceptions happen. And that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing I wanted to build out going forward is just thank you so much for subscribing, for clicking on as we build a base here. And I'm slowly noticing a base being built as we are in the off season. And I won't keep you much longer as we hit the 7-minute mark. But one of the things that's fascinating is to look at the drafts and what we've done in the drafts in the past and how you sustain success or you don't sustain success. And it's interesting to see who the Rams drafted after a Super Bowl season, right? We talked about the 77 draft and the 78 draft, how the 77 draft for the Rams played a huge part in what they did in 79. But the 78 draft also played a huge part of how they fell apart in 81, that they got no contributions at a high level outside of pedestrian Frank Corral as a kicker punter and a rotational, competent defensive lineman in Reggie Doss. But the Rams did make the Super Bowl at the end of the 79 season, January 1980, the Eddie Brown thing. We know that. Ferragamo led them. We know what happened. And then the Rams moved to Anaheim. If you're not aware of that, that's when the Rams left the Coliseum and went to Anaheim. And they conducted their draft. And this was, I think, the last draft that Don Klosterman totally had his hands on. By 1980, Georgia Frontiere and her demonic horde were starting to really infest all corners of Ramdom. And Klosterman was kind of he stuck around till about 82, but it was just a figurehead position. He wasn't getting much say, and you could tell by the drafts the Rams had. The false prophet John Shaw teamed with the Antichrist herself, Georgia Frontiere, were in the process of destroying the team. But in the 1980 draft, Klosterman still had his hands on a say of who was going to be picked, and it really was a heck of a draft. It was a draft that kind of set the Rams up going through the 80s, and we're going to name off some names here. The first one they took, the number one pick, was Johnny Johnson, and they gave him a good contract. If you're not going to remember, but when Johnson got his contract, Larry Brooks, Fred Dreyer, no, I don't know if Dreyer did, but Brooks and Jack Youngblood and Brodzinski, some of them walked out of camp because they said they gave the kid way too much money. Now, Johnson proved worth it. He was a solid safety for the Rams. He was the 17th overall pick out of Texas, became a starter, did a really nice job at safety for the Rams. But with the second pick, the 50th overall selection in that same draft, they drafted Irv Pankey, who ended up becoming a solid right tackle for the team for the next decade or so. He had an injury in '83, but he was pretty solid with the Rams up until the early '90s. The third round pick was Jarrell Thomas. Now, Jarrell Thomas didn't have a long tenure with the Rams. He wasn't going to. Wendell Tyler got hurt in 1980, came back in '81 and he played. And by '83, the Rams had already drafted Eric Dickerson. So Jarrell Thomas wasn't going to play. But Jarrell Thomas had a great late season in 1980. He had some big runs against the Cowboys in a Monday night game, and he proved a tiny bit productive. But with their second third-round pick, the Rams had 3 third-round picks. They also drafted Leroy Irvin. And Irvin was a pretty much a perennial Pro Bowler, All-Pro guy for a number of years with the Rams. He was also a great kick returner, and he was with the Rams through the decade. And he was a contributor to that team. Mike Gooman was another one, kind of an H-back type running back out of Penn State. And they drafted him in the 6th round. In the 7th round, they drafted Jerry Ellis out of Missouri. And it was between him and Gooman and Ellis at the end. And the Rams selected to keep Gooman, which was a good call. H-back, he was a good receiver. He did a nice job for the Rams for about 7-8 years. But here, nice thing about Ellis had a nice career, 7-year career with the Packers. So it wasn't a draft bust. The Rams also drafted George Farmer in that draft. And he had a solid career for a 10th round pick or 11th round pick, but he made some contributions to the 82, 83, 84 teams. And so the Rams got a lot of clicks out of that 1980 draft. And that was the key part, because after the Malavasi era ended, John Robinson came in and they made the playoffs for 4 straight years, 83, 84, 85, 86. The strike year, they didn't. They traded Eric Dickerson that year in 87. And then in 88, 89, they made the playoffs. They made the conference finals in 1985 and 1989. And again, starters on that team, Johnny Johnson, Irv Pankey, Leroy Irvin, and contributors were Mike Gooman. One of the guys drafted in the 7th round that year in 1980 was kind of a sad story, is that he was just starting to break out in 1983, was Kirk Collins. Does anyone remember Kirk Collins? And Kirk Collins went out mid-season, and he eventually died of cancer. But he was another one that was contributing to that team in '83 that was turning things around. Just something interesting to think about. So the Rams were competitive for the most part throughout the '80s after going to the Super Bowl in '79. Now, they won the Super Bowl in 1999, right? You know, the whole Kurt Warner thing, Dick Vermeil, you know, the devil herself gets the Super Bowl trophy, says, we made the right choice coming to whatever. Okay. But, you know, Don Klosterman wasn't making draft choices then. And Dick Vermeil left the building. I think, 2-3 days later after he won the Super Bowl, he stepped away. And the Rams had a draft for the 2000 draft, and there was no brains in the room. How about these names? Do these names register with you? Trung Candidate, Jacob Shepard, John Sinclair, Kalana Noah, Brian Young, Matt Bowen, Andrew Klein. No, they don't, right? Because they were all swings and misses. Trung Candidate was a running back from Arizona. He played with the Rams for a few years. He played in 35 games, mostly special teamer, started 3. But the best clicks the Rams got was Brian Young, a DT. He played in 59 games with the Rams, 31 starts, but no transcendent player. None of these players contributed. None of them became consistent starters. And guess where the Rams were in the 2000 season, right? They lost in the wild card, and they came back in 2001, went to the Super Bowl. But after that Super Bowl period, the greatest show on turf period, the time when these draft picks, Trung Candidate, Jacob Shepard, Jacoby Shepard, John Sinclair, all these guys should have been stepping up. The Rams were nowhere, right? In 2002, after they lost the Super Bowl to the New England Patriots, the Rams drafted names like Robert Thomas, Travis Fisher, Lamar Gordon, Eric Crouch, Travis Scott, Cortland Bullard, Steve Belisari, and Chris Massey. Outside of Travis Fisher, who started for 5 seasons for the Rams at cornerback, and Chris Massey, who was with the team for 9 seasons as a special teamer, no one else contributed anything to this roster. And after that Super Bowl, that's when everything started falling apart for the Rams. They snuck in a couple of playoff appearances with Martz, and then everything went south. And I think between something like, 2007 and 2012, they had the worst record in football ever. or worst 5 seasons in football history. So keep those things in mind, and then keep this in mind. Rams go back to the Super Bowl in 2018. They lose 13-3 to the Patriots again. But think about this. Who did they draft in the 2019 draft after losing the Super Bowl? Taylor Rapp, Darrell Henderson, David Long, Bobby Evans, Greg Gaines, David Edwards, Nick Scott, and Dakota Allen. 6 of those 8 players all played and contributed in the Super Bowl this past year. And they were drafted after the last Super Bowl season in 2019. Rapp was a starter. Darrell Henderson contributed. David Long was a starter. Greg Gaines was fantastic. David Edwards has been a starter for 2 years. Nick Scott was fantastic. And the only one that's been kind of a miss is Bobby Evans. We're still waiting to see. And the only one that's not with the team is Dakota Allen, who was, I think he was on Last Chance U, and then he was with the Rams for a while, got cut. I think he ended up in Oakland. I think he's in Jacksonville now. But that's where you see where the bread is buttered, and it doesn't necessarily have to be first round picks. It doesn't necessarily have to be Hall of Famers, but it's like how you draft is going to tell you how you're going to be in the future. The Rams went through a dark period after that Super Bowl loss. After they lost Super Bowl 36, it was a dark period. You got to remember, I don't think the Rams won a playoff game or did anything post 2004, right? Until Sean McVay gets there, until Les Snead gets time in the building, and finally we get rid of, Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher was okay, but Jeff Fisher was a guy that takes you from 2-14 to 7-9. Thank you very much. You took us from 2-14 to 7-9, but you're not the guy that's going to get us to the playoffs. And so Snead comes in 2012, foundation is laid, and then McVay comes in and they just build on that. But it's the excellent job they've done drafting. And as we saw them draft, the critical draft was the one after Super Bowl 53, after the loss. So they picked up 6 starters in that draft, 6 starters. And that's how you replace a Josh Reynolds. That's how you replace these guys that we're so comfortable with. That's how you replace Todd Gurley. That's how you replace these names, by hitting in all these other spots. JJ, John Johnson, Troy Hill, Dante Fowler Jr., right? And you don't want to go back. You miss the guys. You like the guys. You have attachments. We talked about attachments. But these are the things that have to happen, and these are the things you have to look for. And this is why, when you're a Ram fan, you really should be a little more nuanced. If your team is nuanced, if your team's not the Cardinals and just throwing everything out, let's sign J.J. Watt, let's go get A.J. Green, let's just grab all these names and think it's all going to come together. But your team is the Rams, and the Rams do a little more thinking. The Rams bring a little more to the table, and that, as a Ram fan, if you want to appreciate it for all it's worth, you need to go and look at who they're drafting and who's in the mock drafts right now, what positions they're projecting, what they're thinking, and what they might be looking at in terms of picks. And so these names aren't a surprise to you. And honestly, it does bring a lot more fun to draft day. So it is March 2nd. So we're about 2 weeks away from the technical start of 2022. We're still waiting on Andrew Whitworth's final word. And when that happens, that's going to open up a lot of things. Expect also maybe some restructures coming down, as the Rams have great opportunity here. One, they have draft picks. They got 8 picks in this year's draft, but they also have the possibility of having great room under the cap because the dead money is gone. And this ability, this talk of running it back is a real deal. All right. And so that's your team going forward. And you want to keep tracking all this, and we'll keep coming back every day and talking about it, because this is how franchises are built, and this is how success is sustained. And we'll just see. A couple things I'm hoping for is, one, I got a thing for Cordell Patterson. I wish the Rams would, if they're going to look at a free agent, I wish they'd look at Cordell Patterson. I'd also like to see them go with Bryce Perkins instead of John Wolford at quarterback as a backup. I like Sony Michel, but I think Sony Michel's time is done. I wish we could bring him back, but I don't think it's going to happen. And then if you're going to ask me, because I got a minute here to riff a little bit, My feeling is that I kind of want Whitworth to retire so we can get his money back, retain Joseph Noteboom, and use the rest of it, spread it out along the offensive line. I'm not complaining about Whitworth. Whitworth was great, but man, it's sooner or later, the bill's got to come due on that 40-year-old body, right? It just has to come due. And it would be awful if it came due after we lose Noteboom, because how do you keep Noteboom in the fold? Because somebody's going to offer him something. And there's other players the Rams could lose too. I do like David Long Jr. I do like Dante Dion. I do like Robert Rochelle. And that means Darius Williams, I think, is going to go. We want everybody to stay, but that means he's going to go. And then the whole issue is they got to decide. I think we've seen enough of Taylor Rapp. I think he's good in spots, but I want to see if Terrell Burgess can play. Right? We know Jordan Fuller can, and that other guy Ramsey, right? He's good too. Okay. We're going to hit 21 minutes here, and that's kind of the sweet spot that we want to go to. I'm Joe Terosian, and this is RamView, and we appreciate your support. Please hit subscribe, hit like, leave comments. My friend Gary Brown left one yesterday. I'm happy to talk, happy to interact, happy to take your questions, happy to keep pushing it. And hey, every day we're here with a RamView. All right, folks, God bless. Take care, and we'll see you soon.